Good day, and I hope you're having a good time, and we'll have it for the rest of the day. Today we're going to have some people, Jim Gish, who's the community liaison, and Brian Carpenter, who's the chair of the select board. Good morning.
Good morning, Betty.
Good morning.
And we're going to talk about transportation and other issues. So we thought the bridges is one of the biggest concerns right now.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me, since you're both involved in that issue, what's going on? I think a lot of people do know that something's going to happen in May or June, but can we get to know a little bit more about it?
Sure. I guess I'll jump in, Betty. First, we did a reset on the bridge and rail project and kicked that off with a town meeting at the Town Hall Theater. Since that time, the bridge inspections, we had, because of the winter freeze-thaw cycles that we were going through, the bridges started to deteriorate more rapidly. The last 2 winters have been really tough on our 2 existing, the Main Street and Merchants Row bridges, and as most of the town has recognized, we ended up having this concrete spalling, and it actually opened holes in both of those bridges on the fascia along the sidewalks.
The concrete of the bridge.
The concrete.
Of the bridge sidewalk.
Right. And so the Merchants Row Bridge, we patched the one on, or V-Trans patched, and the one on Main Street, that area has been blocked off with the concrete blocks. So in analyzing the condition of the bridges, how quickly they've started to deteriorate, the length of time before the bridge project will actually have the new replacement tunnel in.
Mm-hmm.
V-Trans took a look at all of that and determined that it was really in need of pulling the 2 bridges out and putting in temporary bridges.
The temporary bridge, is it a solid thing? I mean, it all comes in one piece?
They'll assemble it here. It'll be kind of one piece when it's all in there, yes.
Yeah.
But it's more like one of those construction sets that you had when you were a child, and they bolt it all together, and then it'll be drawn across once the bridges are hammered out of there, and they've set the foundation for the bridge on either side. Then they'll draw the bridge across and do a final set, and then there's a lot of paving work to build the approaches, because it'll be set. I think it's is it a foot or 2 feet higher?
2 feet higher
2 feet
than
higher.
the current roadway.
2 feet higher.
Mm-hmm.
And so the approaches will be, they'll have to feather that in so that you can go up and then go back down,
Yeah.
and then the final striping, the line striping, and so it's a fairly sizable project, and but it's one that was deemed necessary to ensure that we didn't have a failure on one of those bridges where they had to close the bridge, and then we would have and with no immediate plan for replacement, and that we would therefore have real traffic issues in Middlebury on main thoroughfares.
So then you wouldn't be able to use Painter's Road for a while, or as long as the bridges were there.
Printer's Alley.
Prince's Alley, yeah.
Right. Yeah, the town had a decision to make about the configuration of the Main Street Bridge. The way this bridge sets on Main Street, it has to, as Brian said, sit a couple feet up. There have to be approaches on each side, which means it's angled down on each side as well. And so the town was faced with the decision of whether to close Printer's Alley to vehicle traffic or to give up the parking on the south side of the street, which is the church side of the street. and the select board asked V-Trans to revise a plan that they had first seen, which closed Printers Alley and restored parking on the south side of Main Street. Now, Printers Alley will remain open throughout the duration of the project to pedestrian traffic as long as it's safe, but it will be closed to vehicle traffic throughout that period.
Will that same thing happen to the one on Merchants Row?
The Battelle entrance? No.
Pocket?
No, that's necessary parking for the residents and users of Battelle Block, and so there will be an approach to that parking area, and so while prior to the new approach that they'll put in coming off from Water Street, there'll be approach where those vehicles coming in, Merchants Row will be one way from the bridge up the hill, but to the bridge it'll be two-way to allow for the access and egress of the Battelle exit.
So so you can get in and out of that parking lot
Yes,
from Merchants Row?
from
But
Merchants
a
Row.
little bit different place? No?
It'll be the same place that it is now, and that's really the most complicating factor in putting temporary bridges onto Merchants Row is the difficult angle and the narrowness of that entrance. But the plan that V-Trans presented preserves that entrance and exit for residents, for people who work at the Battelle Block, and for your smaller service trucks, so that folks can go in and they can come out of there too safely.
And it's one way, so, but they're used to that.
It's one. Well, the Merchants Row will be two-way. If you take a right on Main Street onto Merchants Row, it'll be two-way to the bridge, and then it'll be a single-lane bridge going one-way eastbound up to Court Square and South Pleasant Street. But that will allow traffic to come in and out safely from the Battelle Block
From
parking
Block,
lot.
Yeah. Oh, good. I think that's important. Now, the work is going to take place much earlier than had been anticipated.
The work as far as the replacement
Yeah.
of the bridge, yes, because we were looking at 2020 for dropping the bridges when we were doing as part of the Bridge and Rail project. Now that we're doing the temporary bridge, it was scheduled to be done this summer. Originally, V-Trans had looked at June. The select board talked about it. We asked Jim. Jim did a wonderful job getting all of the calendars of this town onto one master calendar. The college,
master
the high
calendar.
school, all of the town activities, Festival on the Green, the Lions auction, everything got onto one calendar with all of the stakeholders, and then looked at that and analyzed what window made the most sense and was least disruptive to the town. We were quite proud of the work he did on that, and we really
Thank
feel
you.
like it helped make it more accepted by all of the stakeholders, because it really has got the minimal impact on the town. It'll be done now, July 21st to August 5th. And so that'll be the window of disruption, and the major window of disruption this summer in the downtown.
July 20.
July 21st to August 5th.
Yeah, so there'll be, V-Trans needs to do some preparatory work, and that will take place into early June, say early June into about the third week of June. And so they will be in town to relocate the Main Street water line, which runs along the current Main Street sidewalk. So they'll do some work relocating that so that it's out of the way and water continues to flow through town as it should. They'll reconfigure some stormwater catch basins that are in the existing bridge areas. And then they'll dig some mini piles. Now, mini piles are means of supporting the bridges that are to come in 2020, but it makes sense for V-Trans to install those support piles now before the temporary bridges come in, because it will reduce the time to put in the bridges when they're built in 2020. So that'll take a week or two of time on both Main Street and Merchants Row. And there'll be some noise with those piles going in, but it won't be the kind of jackhammer noises that we heard with Cross Street Bridge. There's a different technique they'll use for installing those. So that work will take place over the first 3 weeks of June, and the construction crews will be working normal construction hours, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And there'll be some lane closures and some loss of parking downtown, but it'll be carefully managed by the construction crews to keep traffic flowing and accessibility to businesses open.
And the people who are working, what about their cars or trucks?
They will be parking at a remote site. They're in discussions now where they'll have a remote site and staging area so that in fact, VTrans requires this contractually that no construction worker can park in downtown parking spaces.
Because we need those parking spaces.
Exactly.
We do.
They're working, Kabricki, the contractor, is working with some landowners to rent space for their workers to park off-site and shuttle them in.
Now, is the high school closed at the time this starts?
Yes.
And can you use that, or does the high school have other uses for that?
Well, I believe they're working with private landowners, so that
Private landowners.
they're not tying up public infrastructure.
Okay,
Right.
yeah.
So as Brian said, once this preparatory work is done, the construction workers go away. The crews go away for about 3 weeks, so that our premier events downtown, Festival on the Green, Peasants Market, Lions Club auction, can all take place safely and with adequate parking downtown.
Wow.
And so that was the value of creating this master calendar of events. Then they'll all be back, as Brian said, on July 21st, after the Lions Club auction, which is the final string of events there. And they will, on the first weekend, demolish Main Street Bridge. And so that'll be 24/7 work. It'll be loud. It'll be a lot of activity there to take that bridge down. Then during the following week, they'll do some preparation work for installing the Main Street
Pillars,
Bridge.
you mean? Or?
Well, that'll have taken place in June. At this point, then they'll be working on assembling the temporary bridge that will go on Main Street. So then on the second weekend, which is the last weekend in July, 2 things will happen. The temporary bridge will be installed on Main Street, and the Merchants Row Bridge will be demolished. So at that point, before the Main Street Bridge reopens and while Merchants Row Bridge is being demolished, we have downtown closed to through traffic. That'll last, VTrans expects 4 or 5 days, so fairly minimal at a time when there's not a lot of events or high school's not open. We'll have to shut down traffic.
4 or 5 days will be bad. Yeah.
And that's the hope. And then on the third weekend of this exercise, Merchants Row Bridge, the temporary bridge, will be installed, and traffic will have been opened up on both bridges, and they'll do final paving and striping and reconfiguring of parking lines and so forth. So the plan is that maybe 4 or 5 spots will be lost altogether on Main Street, and we hope to break even on Merchants Row in terms of parking. So fairly minimal impact on parking downtown when these temporary bridges go in.
And if all the employees and the owners of the businesses park elsewhere, because I know that some of them park on Main Street and Merchants Row, so they really need to open those spaces up and not do that. I suppose that the businesses have been told that.
We've talked about that many times
Yes.
in the past. I think the only way that we will actually get to that goal is if we go back to enforcing a parking time limit.
Yeah, with some person.
Right, and we haven't for the last couple of years, but certainly we feel that maybe this is a time where it's critical to enforce that, to ensure that parking can rotate for the people who are coming in to use the services and go to the stores.
Yeah.
And sometimes even the store staff needs to be reinforced the notion that they have to leave those parking spaces for their
Right.
customers.
Yeah.
That's customer parking.
I know the select board has tried that and worked on that for years, and I know we had somebody.
We did.
And did it work?
I think it helped.
It helped.
Right. And so we need to re-staff that position and reinforce it.
I don't understand why people don't remember that if the parking lot's there, then I have business. And the employee has business to do. But if they park in all the places and the cars can't come, they might have less business. Maybe they don't need the extra help. I mean,
I don't think they do it intentionally, Betty. I think
No.
a lot of times they're the early ones there, and there's lots of parking, and the assumption is,
Right.
okay, yeah, there's
Yeah.
plenty of parking, and it's during the really peak times where it becomes an issue. It's
Yeah.
not always an issue, but during those peak times, we need every space that we can
Yeah.
get,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, that's when they're busy doing their job and,
Yeah.
and probably not thinking about it.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Okay, and so, no, let's see here. The hours are going to be 7 to 5.
Correct. During the preparation work, there'll be 7 to 5, and when it comes to the demolition of the bridges, that will take place on weekends, and that'll be could be 24/7. That's when the railroad will be has agreed not to come through town, so they'll be able to have full access to the rail line and be able to demolish the bridges there.
Well, what are they going to do?
They just won't run the train on those 3 weekends that I talked about.
Oh.
So
They can't use the other easterly track. I mean, I know that there's a track from the west track that goes over to the east track, and the east track comes to Burlington, and then you can come back down to Middlebury from that area.
They don't own those tracks, though,
No.
Betty. And so that takes a collaborative agreement, a shared use agreement, and for that time period, they feel that they can stage ahead and then and behind because it's only a couple days. But that's about the maximum amount they can go without running the train and without them running out of fuel, for instance, in the Burlington depot. And so they're able to stage it so that it works this time without having that agreement, and because it's not a very simple move to just move it over to the easterly route, because it takes twice the number of engines, and they don't have those. So when we do the bypass or the detour, the reroute of the train for the 10 weeks during the actual bridge and rail project, it's a pretty significant muscle move on the rail company's part, because they have to hire in an extra crews, because the crews time out. It's federally mandated the amount of time that they can go, and they time out. And secondly, they need extra engines because they're going over the mountain twice, and to pull the train that they do have, the number of cars, it takes more than what they have, and they'll have to rent those in. It takes twice the amount, or 4 times the amount of fuel. I've seen the staffing work that's done on it, and so it's a pretty significant event. And for this particular project of the replacement of the putting in the temporary bridges, it's much easier for them just to plan and stage before and behind each weekend.
I hadn't thought of that because I was promoting to go around
Yes.
quite a bit. Because I thought, but I was told that the other train, that they don't own that track on the east.
Right.
The track people who are on the west. And I was told that they wouldn't agree to that, but I asked if they had asked them, and they said no.
well, they have since
At that time,
Yeah.
Right.
that's
Right.
good 6 or 9 months ago.
Well, the VTrans got involved at the secretary level and has brought the two parties together. As you can imagine, it's a complicated negotiation when you have two competing railroads. But I think I'm told that they are getting close to an agreement for that 10-week period when both bridges will be closed. So
Yeah, they have different customers. I mean, I don't think maybe I'm wrong, but the trains on the west aren't going to start picking up work on the east side of the thing. They're just going to go use it to get somewhere, not use it to pick up business.
yeah, I think whenever you have competing railroads, there's always a wariness in coming to an agreement, particularly since Vermont Rail will be using New England Central's rail line and wants to be assured that its freight will be given the right priority.
You have here that will Actor be still located on Merchants Row.
Correct. And as you would expect, given the installation of the temporary bridges and the kind of reconfiguration of Merchants Row, Actor will be asked to relocate from Merchants Row. And that's the town's currently in discussion with Actor about where it could be located temporarily and then where it will be located more permanently as the project takes place.
Did you have something?
No, it really, with the putting in the temporary bridges and the reconfiguration of Merchants Row, it has pressed us to make the move of Actor significantly sooner than we were preparing for, and so it may move twice, who knows, but we have to move it off from Merchants Row for safety as a bare minimum.
I hope when it all gets done, we'll have a nice new sidewalk on Merchants Row.
That's the plan.
That's the plan.
That is the plan, and
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of work being focused on the final look and feel of this center of our downtown, the intersection of Merchants Row and Main Street, after the project's over. And the hope is that between what the project covers and grants that the town will apply for and town funding, that we'll have all new sidewalks on Merchants Row and on Main Street.
Oh, on Main Street too, both sides.
Yes.
Oh. Both sides of Merchants Row.
At least the side on Battelle block that runs
Yeah.
up, and I think that on both sides as well, since a lot of construction activity will be taking place on the green side of Merchants Row as well. So, well,
Now, there's a danger that stuff you're taking away falls on the track, and they have to pick that all up so the train can go by.
correct.
That worries some people.
No, they'll have to go and police the tracks, clean everything, and the rail company has to inspect it before they can run a train through there. So it's all regulated and part of the plan to ensure that the safety of the trains coming through there.
I think people like to know that it's regulated,
It
and
is-
then that these things, you know, how are you going to do this, how are you going to do that, what's going to happen, and that when they know it, they feel better about knowing that, you know, the sidewalks will be put back. They know better that this and that, whatever.
I think the streetscape is one of the things that people will be really impressed with when it's all said and done, what this looks like.
We have about 5 minutes left, so let's get to the environment. The
Yes.
environmental assessment.
Okay.
What can you tell me about that?
Well, I think the first thing I'd like to do is put a plug in to encourage people to come to our May 11th town hall or town theater event where VTrans will present the plan and their findings and take public comment on
Now, where is this going to be held?
at Town Hall Theater.
Town Hall Theater,
And it's at 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
Before that, from 4 to 6, there'll be an opportunity for one-on-one questioning. It'll focus on 3 areas. Number 1 is the environmental assessment. If you have questions about the environmental assessment, any particular area. Number 2, about the temporary bridges. Any questions on the temporary bridges, they'll be there to answer that. And number 3, just general project questions, anything about the project. So there'll be a full team there from 4 to 6 p.m. to answer one-on-one specific questions. And then at 7 p.m. will be the actual hearing where they take public testimony, and it's entered into the document, and then they will respond as part of the process of the environmental assessment, and it will go to FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, for a determination on the project, whether we're okay to go or if it needs to undergo a more thorough environmental impact statement. Jim has worked with them, and it's a significant document that's available currently online, and I think, Jim, did you say you have a link to it on your blog?
I do. The blog, which I've been keeping the community up to date, is at www.middleburybridges.org. And VTrans also maintains a project website, and you can get to that by simply going to Google and putting in VTrans Middlebury project. It'll take you right to the site where there's a lot of where there's the full environmental assessment available for review, and a lot of other good project information as well.
What was the, when did you repeat the?
Sure, the blog site is www.middleburybridges.org.
Okay.
And the VTrans project website, rather than lay out a long URL, I will let you know that if you go to Google and you put in VTrans Middlebury project, it'll take you right to the main page.
Okay.
Make it easy.
Now, what's the next steps after the public hearing?
After the public hearing, the environmental group that's been doing the study will take all of the testimony. If there's anything new, they'll respond to that.
Well, you said an environmental group now. Is that Middlebury people?
No,
State people?
why don't Jim has actually worked with them. He knows all the players. And,
Sure, this is it's kind of an extended project team that's managed by VTrans, but it includes experts from across the state who have commented on or analyzed everything from historic resources in town to air quality, groundwater quality, land use, and so forth. So the next step is that the public comments will be put into the record. They will be cataloged, they'll be reviewed, there'll be a written response to each comment, and that will lead to a final environmental assessment document. That document will be presented to the Federal Highway Administration in Montpelier, and the senior environmental manager for the Federal Highway Administration will make a determination of whether the project can then go forward at this point, or, as Brian said, it needs a more extensive environmental analysis. That decision should come late summer.
Mm-hmm. So people have a chance to go and hear what's going on if they...
May 11th,
May
7
11th.
p.m.
May 11th.
at the Town Hall Theater.
All right.
Please come out.
Well, thank you for coming. Our time is up, unfortunately.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you, Betty.
It's, I think a lot of people are interested in this subject and want the details, you know. What happens to this? What happens to this? You know, they got the big idea, but a lot of people use sidewalks and stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Bye-bye.